Good morning. Welcome to Gen Taub Live, and we have a huge show today. The most important thing that I want to say to you is that my dear friend, the ever brilliant, lovely Dahlia Lithwick, is joining us today. And I think you know Dahlia because she is a fabulous editor and writer for Slate, and she also has penned as of yesterday, the most important read that any of us can indulge in regarding the Elon Musk Doge fiasco fascism situation in which we now, as Americans, find ourselves in. Now, I want to let you know that Dahlia will be joining us at 9 a.m. So until then, what I'm going to have to leave you with is that she has absolutely cracked the code. Her piece in Slate, which I encourage you to read and we'll be talking about when she arrives at 9 a.m., is titled, I Just Figured Out What Elon Musk's Doge Really Is. That it's a protection racket should have been obvious all along. Okay, I'm saving Dahlia for 9 a.m. But in the top of our breaking news is this. Not only is Elon Musk's Doge, and because it is his, despite the fact that he is claiming that the White House, that I should say, or the executive office of the president, Donald Trump's team is claiming that Elon Musk is merely an advisor to the president, that he is not the Doge administrator. Okay? Well, breaking news is whoever the fuck is running Doge, which is Elon Musk, and his underlings are really stupid and bad at their jobs. And maybe that is the point, because my friends, you're not going to effing believe this. And I know, I know that I didn't tell you that math would be part of Gen Taub Live, but you know, I love to follow the money, and I'm actually a math gal, okay? And so you're not going to flippin' believe this, but they don't know how to add things up. And they were claiming that they had found or saved billions of dollars, and it was only millions. Okay, here is the headline from the New York Times, and we have 4 bylines on this one from yesterday. I've got to read this headline for those who are wandering around and not watching. Hi, Michael, wanderer. Anyway, so here's the headline in the New York Times. Doge claimed it saved $8 billion in one contract. Billion with a B. I added that to the headline. So Doge claimed it saved $8 billion in one contract. It was actually $8 million. Why do we know they effed this up? Because they put this on Elon Musk's website. And the New York Times journalists were able to figure out that it was a huge error. Folks, billion and million. Don't make that mistake. Okay? I know in elementary school they have us do computational math, and everyone's so obsessed with getting the exact right number, right? And the biggest mistake they make, and they only teach you this when you get into the sort of science fields in middle school and high school and beyond, that you really don't want to have an error that is like this kind of magnitude between million and billion. And so you should always look at a number and say, does that make a lot of sense? And I teach my students this when we look at financial statements. And I know it can be hard for people to figure out when numbers are shortened down on a financial statement. They throw off some zeros and they say, okay, this is in thousands and what have you. I understand that it might be hard for someone the first time they look at it. But these are people who are being hired to literally slash and burn our federal government. And you would think on their first foray to show that they're actually doing a good job as opposed to a bunch of stooges, that they would get the math right, but they absolutely didn't. And why is this breaking news important? Because here's the deal. One thing Elon Musk claimed when he took on the Doge role is that, and he said this very recently at the White House while Donald Trump was sitting beneath him and he talked on and on. Remember that scene where Donald Trump is sitting there, kind of arms crossed, looking at Elon Musk, and Elon Musk's youngest son, little X, is telling Donald Trump to shush. Remember that scene? Well, what Elon Musk was saying at the time, among other things, is how absolutely transparent Doge was going to be. They're going to be absolutely transparent and share all this information. And they had put up a website, they claimed, to do this. And at the time, the website was blank. There was something on it. And then it gets even worse, because then they actually put something on the website, and hackers easily hack into it and changed what the front page said. And now, when they're attempting their first attempt to show what a great job they're doing at cutting contracts. I didn't even say what kind of contract this is in the headline, but right, they're doing their job to try to cut contracts and wasteful spending. And they claim they saved $8 billion, and it was only $8 million. These people are complete morons, right? And you might say to yourself, how could they make this mistake, right? And believe it or not, I can share that with you. I would like to. You know, this show is about breaking down complex legal ideas, but it's also a follow the money show. So allow me to share with you a little bit about this fiasco, because at the end of the day, the promises that Donald Trump has always been making to people is, one, grocery. I will cut your bills right away, day one, right? And now yesterday he's saying, well, inflation's back, but don't blame me. I've only been in office for a few weeks. Money. The other thing they're now trying to claim is that Doge is going to send all of us a check for like, I don't know, $5,000 from the money they cut, right? Oh my God. First of all, what a flippin' Ponzi scheme, number one. And two, do you really want this little like crumb, this $5,000, which would make all the difference in a lot of our lives, right? And they're doing that to buy off people at the smallest price, to allow them to steal for themselves, because that's what they're doing. And I'll explain what Elon's doing, his big picture, stealing and theft, and steal from children and programs in our educational system. They're trying to turn us all into serfs and beg for crumbs. And we won't fall for it. At least most of us won't. So now I do want to share with you this error, because this is the kind of thing showing what a flippin' joke they are. They don't just lie deliberately, like lie that condoms were sent to Gaza and other kinds of lies. They also make stupid mistakes. And we can't tell the difference because they're doing such a bad job at just completely trying to throw everything out, completely trying to dismantle the administrative state. And Dahlia will talk about the plan here. They're just doing it this kind of hatchet job. And so then when bad stuff happens, I say, oh, it was a spreadsheet error. Or, oh, we didn't mean to fire the people who are keeping track of our nuclear arsenal. Or, oops, it was an accident that we fired the people trying to stop avian flu. They'll say these were errors, but they're not errors if you are deliberately and recklessly ripping through our government. And I'm only laughing because I was thinking of John Delaney, the comedian, and that whole horse in the hospital sketch, right? It's like they have a fucking stable full of horses running through an ICU unit. And then the press wants to say, oops, it was an accident that they trampled over and knocked over, all the IVs. No, if you let a stable full of horses into the intensive care unit, everything that flows from that is deliberate as far as I am concerned. Now, let us show you what effing morons these people are. And I promise not to take long. I'm just going to show you and share with you the New York Times article. I'm actually not going to, show you some complicated spreadsheet that I don't even have my hands on. Okay, so here we go. You're looking at this, and I'm going to see if I can blow this up for you a little bit. Okay, I think that is big enough now. Okay, so this is this New York Times article. Okay, This is from, it's been updated this morning. I first read it last night. And, you know, we're not going to, you could if you wanted to listen to it, but that's 4 minutes and 49 seconds. We don't actually need to listen to the whole thing. But let me tell you how it goes. Doge claimed it saved $8 billion in one contract. It was actually $8 million. And it says the biggest single line item on the website of Elon Musk's cost-cutting team appears to include an error. Okay, so this is it. The Department of Government Efficiency, this so-called federal cost-cutting initiative championed by Elon Musk, published on Monday, this is, 2 days ago, a list of government contracts it has canceled, together amounting to about $16 billion in savings. This is what they claimed, itemized on a new so-called wall of receipts on its website. Almost half of those line item savings could be attributed to a single $8 billion contract for the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, ICE. But it appears that the Doge list vastly overstated the actual intended value of that contract. A closer scrutiny of a federal database shows that a recent version of the contract was for $8 million, not $8 billion. A larger total savings never published on the site, which they talked about, they claimed $55 billion lacked specific documentation. Okay. What a joke. I mean, do we even begin with the meme to say, okay, I just have to say it. When Kamala Harris was running for office and the newspapers were like, oh, she hasn't provided sufficient detail. And she had provided sufficient detail about her plans, as far as I'm concerned. Where is the outcry? Why is this not a bigger deal? I don't know. I mean, maybe we have to follow the money and the ideology of the people who own, such as the Washington Post or the LA Times, or even the New York Times, because they should be much more hard hitting on this. Okay, now, my second story for you guys. I'm going to bring that to you right now, but I think we need a little palate cleanser. And right now, I want to bring back on stage our friend of the show. I didn't warn you, but it is, of course, Tank the Tortoise. Yes, it is Tank the Tortoise. Yes, don't we need a little endorphins? Hey, Tank. Because you know what about Tank? Tank the Tortoise, who is a beloved pet of one of the people who watches this show and is a regular, a Prism mate. Tank the Tortoise lives his life with somebody who, I don't want to name the person, but this is somebody who is a government employee. And going through what, if you are a federal government employee right now, this is a difficult time. And I want to refer now to not Tank's owner, but to a friend of mine from Michigan. I have a friend in Michigan, and I'm not going to talk about what agency she works for, who works for the federal government. And at this point, she hasn't gotten any kind of notice that she's losing her job and doesn't intend to take the fake buyout. But she's absolutely looking for a different job because she's a brilliant lawyer and she had a lot of flexibility in terms of when she took the job, even well before COVID, she had flexibility as to working from home because her job involves multi-sites that she would sometimes have to travel to. Just an excellent job. And now, of course, this mandate that everybody show up at work every single day, even though if she shows up at the job location closest to her home, no one she deals with is there, right? All of her work involves managing and dealing with people across the country. So, of course, this very talented person is looking for a different job now in the private sector. Fortunately, she is not like many people we are hearing about who are the sole provider. Another family member has lost their job. They're taking care of elderly parents. They have children and they need their job and they've lost their job. And we are hearing this over and over again. And let me say, in the sort of bigger picture of this, the prediction right now unless this course is reversed, is that we are going to be in a recession, and job losses will be as nearly as high, but not quite as high as they were in certain months of 2008 and 2009 after the mortgage crisis and the global financial crisis brought on by, remember, banks taking on too much debt by extending risky loans to people to push them into transactions they couldn't afford. Anyway, so I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just telling you what I am reading in the news. Now, this course might be able to be reversed, but, it's kind of utter chaos and madness. Now, what's weird, though, is if you watch the financial markets, which will open today at 9:30. Sorry, I'm getting into the weeds right now. You would think, let me just say this. It says 5 things. I'm reading from CNBC. This is from this morning. 5 things to know before the stock market opens Wednesday. Now, this is weird. The S&P 500 closed at an all-time high. However, home builder sentiment fell to its lowest level in 5 months. So home building is down because, of course, the things that you need to build homes are going to be much more expensive because of tariffs. This is a record high. However, with cost concerns, we are seeing home building decline. So even though I'm saying 2 different things. On the one hand, there are people predicting a major recession, job loss, and yet we also see the stock market high. Now, of course, the stock market isn't reflective of you and me in the broader economy. Stocks prices can go up. It is an immediate reaction to this idea that people are going to lose their jobs because then shareholders will get more money. I'm not really sure. There's a mix of information I can't sort through, and I can't predict the future, but I don't like what I see when I see so many people losing their jobs and the fear that is attached to that. Now, a couple news items before we get to Crazy Town. So, Eric Adams. So, yes, I wish that Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, would pressure Adams into resigning. And if you watched Lawrence O'Donnell last night, he was explicitly clear, because people may not know this, that the governor of New York doesn't actually have the authority to fire the mayor of New York. These are 2 separate sovereigns, right? A state government and a city. But she does have the power to hold hearings. And there is also, of course, public pressure. And we talked about yesterday how all these deputy mayors had resigned. And at this point, Eric Adams doesn't have the confidence of the people of New York, and probably wouldn't be reelected. But if he doesn't step down, this is going to be a long campaign. Now, the election for New York mayor, right now there's no plan for a special election, but the election is off season. It's an odd year, so it's not the same year as the congressional or presidential elections. The election will be November 4th of 2025, so this upcoming November, which is pretty far from now. And if there's not a special election, he's going to try to hang on until then. Okay, so there's a lot of criticism of how this could be handled, and I get that. But I want to show you what Hakeem Jeffries had to say. Some people, including myself, wishes he were tougher. On the other hand, some of this is psychological at this point. And I think he's trying to make the case the best he can, that he needs to step down without saying directly to Adams in a more confrontational way, which I would prefer to see. Okay, and I see that Dahlia is here. So let me, I'm going to show you this. She's early, so she's probably fine listening. I'm going to show you the Jeffries, and then I'm going to show you a contrast on for our person of the day on how to handle situations like this. Then we'll quickly do Crazy Town and get Dahlia up on stage. Okay, here is Jeffries.
Adams has a responsibility to decisively demonstrate to the people of New York City that he has the capacity to continue to govern in the best interest of New Yorkers as opposed to taking orders from the Trump administration.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have the capacity to push the guy out. Neither does Hochul. They can shame him out, I guess. That didn't seem like the kind of shaming I like to see. This is how it should be done. This is my bestie. She's not my bestie. I've only met her once, but I wish she were my bestie. Representative Jasmine Crockett. Let's go.
It's not even just nonsense. It's just that they're idiots. I mean, these are the same guys, remember, as it relates to our nuclear stockpile, right? They're like, oh, wait a minute. We needed those guys. Yeah. Oh, can we get them back? Oh, we don't know how to. Like, I don't know how anyone in this country can look at this administration and feel some semblance of any type of confidence, right? And this is all at the same time. Like, Elon doesn't want us talking about the fact that he has received almost $1 billion worth of new contract money from the U.S. government in just 2 weeks. Yep. $400 million for Tesla and over $300 million for SpaceX. This is nothing more than a money grab. He's not out there trying to save money for the American people. That's not what he's doing. He's lining his pockets. And at the same time, he's outraging people who don't know exactly how we spend our money and how it benefits us.
I know that Dahlia is going to say it's more than a money grab, but I give Jasmine Crockett an A+. This is what we want to see in our electeds. More of that now. One last thing we got to do Crazy Town. I don't know if Dahlia has experienced the full Crazy Town ever, but here we go. Okay, great Crazy Town music. So today on Crazy Town, we have none other than Stephen Miller. And this Crazy Town of him talking to, I think it's Brianna Keilar on CNN, is it's crazy. And I want to warn you in advance, a sort of trigger warning. If you had a verbally abusive father, for example, or you are a victim of domestic violence, and I'm not joking, this is extremely triggering. This is an awful thing, but he is doing this on television and it's crazy. And we need to figure out, I think Keilar does a pretty good job here dealing with him, but I think the news media needs to figure out a better way for dealing with people who are expressing this kind of abuse, because this kind of verbal rapey domination has to end. We can't give them this platform. We can't normalize this. Here we go.
And I don't think anyone. Then why are you not celebrating these cuts? If you agree there is waste, if you agree there is abuse, if you agree there is corruption, why are you not celebrating the cuts, the reforms that are being instituted? Every day that no action is.
By the way, does he sound like he's in a celebratory mood? I don't see it. Here we go. Oops. I'm adding.
The entire salaries of American workers that are taxed disappear forever.
Stephen, let's calm down.
This is not.
We're not having a debate.
There's no reason
about whether there are places.
You are clearly trying to debate me, and I will be as excited as I want to be about the fact that we are saving Americans billions of dollars, that we are ending the theft and waste and grift and corruption, that we are stopping American taxpayer dollars from subsidizing a rogue federal.
Okay, enough, Stephen. I would have cut him off and I would have put up on the show this headline, right? This is the headline. They claim they saved $8 billion. It was actually $8 million. Where was Brianna Keilar saying, you know, I would be excited about eliminating fraud, waste, and abuse if you weren't screaming at me, if they were transparent, if they actually had constitutional authority, and if they weren't entirely, mendacious, malevolent, moronic men taking over our country in a coup. But, I guess she's not allowed to say that on CNN, which brings me, let us bring on stage my dearest friend, Dahlia Lithwick. But before I do that, you need to see, just as a reminder, Dahlia's article in Slate today came out last night. Read it today. I just figured out what Elon Musk's Doge really is. Okay, Dahlia, tell us.
Hello, lovely. It's so good to see you.
Hi.
I'm a little heartsick. Like my coffee's like coming back up just watching Stephen Miller be like, why won't you feel the way I demand that you feel? Like, it is literally, it's not even abusive, Jen. I'm sorry. I know we're not here to talk about this.
No, I want to keep going. Yeah.
It's not even just that it's abusive. It's like, I think I likened it to like a toddler who's like, you know, having a little fit in the candy aisle. And he's like, but I'm having a feeling, and that means you have, like, what is the theory of mind? What is the like Piaget developmental stage at which you grow out of the idea that you can demand that other people feel happiness about a thing that nobody is happy about because you're lying to them? And it's so like, it's not even just gaslighting. It's like gaslighting with a side of like such self-absorption that he just wants Americans to feel relief at a thing that is causing pain. And then he's like screaming because they won't feel it. Anyway, it's very.
It is these tantrums. These tantrums because, you know, they're the dog that caught the car. And excuse me, but we're not actually happy, you know, with a Rottweiler, drunk Rottweiler driving the car. And if they want us to be happy, then maybe they should pull over to the side of the road and let normal people take over. This metaphor is bad. Dahlia, welcome, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Okay, so, I mean, I didn't talk about Chutkan's decision. I mean, yesterday we talked about the case, but I would like you to first tell us, you know, you've kind of cracked the code around what is going on with Doge. And I want you to kind of talk about your thesis. And, you know, if you don't do it, I'm going to read your paragraph about the Medicis. So tell us what you have decided, like and don't be modest, because there's different takes on this, including mine, which I used to say was just a smash and grab. This is more than that. So please tell us your thesis and why you're not jumping off a cliff. And please walk me off the ledge. Lots of jumping metaphors here. Please go.
I mean, first of all, hi, everybody. It's so good to be with you. And I don't know that it's like a huge insight. It was one of those things that I felt like was an insight for me. And it was simply that it's easy to say, as Jasmine Crockett said in your last segment, like they're just, you know, giving themselves all these contracts and like making all this money off it. It is a classic smash and grab. Except that there's a through line that I just wanted to highlight because I think it's worth pondering. And that is, it's not simply that they're taking all the stuff to give it to themselves, right? Including our information, but you know, every single government service that they take away from the FAA or the TSA or the EPA or, you know, everything they take away from the Department of Education, we're going to need. And what they're actually doing it is selling it back to us. I mean, this is the piece of it that I think is really important, because then you're not just in a sort of a pillaging, right? Like this is simply, you know, absolutely an act of vandalism.
So metaphor here, it's not that the bully is stealing our lunch money. The bully is stealing your lunch and making you buy it back.
Making you buy it back. That's perfect. I wish I'd written that.
Well,
and
the only check with me in advance. So.
The only reason I think it's really important, and I opened the piece with this, is that I remember right at the very beginning when they froze all the funding out of OMB, and Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, gave that really creepy press conference. And the part of the press conference that was scariest was like, people were like, wait, are you defunding Head Start? Are you like taking away student loans? Like, what are you taking away? And she very calmly said that she was in daily communication with Russ Vought, right? Project 2025, now the head of OMB. And the person who like architected this idea, right, of destroying the government. But she said the most interesting thing, Jen, and I just want to lift it up for people who didn't catch it. She said, if you think that your agency or entity or program is in compliance with our directives, then just hop on the phone with Russ Vought and he'll like reinstate you. And at the time I thought, well, that's not how this works. Like, hop on the phone and special plead for yourself to be exempted from something. That's not how we do things, because that puts you in a position, right? And this is the Medici part, where you're literally going hat in hand to the government and asking for monies that Congress appropriated and allocated and set aside for you. And we shouldn't have to be going to the government hat in hand and asking for special favors, because now we are literally in a position where we are petitioning the government to give us our money that they took from us. And I think closing that loop in my head was really important. And then the piece just goes on to list multiple places where we're seeing that happen. We're seeing it's not just that Doge is taking stuff away, it's that Doge has every intention of taking stuff away and selling it back.
And if you look at this, just to use this sort of, kind of transition, sort of intersection between feudalism and mercantilism, I guess. If you look at this, you also see prepaying tribute. I mean, if you're looking at Donald Trump as saying, "I'm king," doesn't matter if you elected a king, doesn't matter if you wanted one. I have all the power, and I'm going to show you because I can turn the spigot off and I can turn it on. And just saying that, I mean, he did it sort of in his first term where people knew to stay, all the emoluments. Oh my God, emoluments now look like the little mints they put on your hotel bed. I mean, it's nothing compared to where we are now. He is demanding, first there's the prepaying of the tributes by settling these lawsuits they didn't need to settle, right? And now there's actually literally, like you said, leave it. Is that how you call it? Is it leave it, not Levitt? Because that's I do like it. Carolyn Leavitt, this sort of 22-year-old Barbie doll. No offense, I love Barbie dolls, but she is there just like Pete Hegseth is to project a certain kind of soap opera success that Donald Trump thinks what things should appear like. But she's standing up there, and she made a big mistake by saying, call this guy and plead your case, which means basically pay tribute. Do something. And this is the Zelensky thing all over again. Could you do us a favor? What is the favor? And this is, I know that I'm kind of now drawing a line between your article and what is going on right now with Ukraine. Because two things. Yes, it's horrific that Donald Trump said you started the war, which we know isn't true. They were sovereign nation invaded. But separately, what he's saying is, which I don't think he would follow through with, is give us a huge chunk of your mineral rights and we'll protect you. I mean, this is exactly his mindset. And it is happening, not just on the global scale, but to the rest of us. And so I guess it's not your job to tell me how we get out of this. But Chutkan obviously isn't going to do a TRO, temporary restraining order, and I didn't think she would. But is that lawsuit brought by about a dozen states going to actually do something to put the brakes on what Elon Musk and Donald Trump and Russ Vought are doing? Or, I don't see a good ending here necessarily. And I know you can't predict acts of God, but what legal pressure or what other techniques can be used so we're not completely demolished as a society and turned into gangster rule?
So one thing I want to say just in response to what you just said is it's really useful to just come back to constitutional first principles for a minute. Okay. And the reason that the executive branch doesn't have the power of the purse, right? This is just very simple. I mean, and remember again what we were throwing off when, the notion of this like tripartite checking and balancing system is that the minute that the executive branch has the power of the purse, then you're in, right? Now you're in the role of you have to seek special favors, you have to pay tribute. That's why this exists. And so let's just kind of really hold
Article 1 of the Constitution, where they say it is the power of the purse, I don't quote it like that, it is up to Congress to spend. They make the spending and the appropriations decision even after a law is passed. That's why it's there, to avoid kings expecting tribute. Okay,
perfect.
Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to say it because I think it's implicit in absolutely everything you just said, but I think sometimes we forget. That's why those two powers are disaggregated, right? So now you're asking me this really hard question, which is the question not just about Chutkan and the TRO and whether the AGs can prevail down the line in this suit. I think you're asking me like a much bigger question about how this can be stopped, right? So I will say, as to the sort of narrower question, it seems to me that it was clear that Judge Chutkan is struggling with what is the limit of her power, right, and authority. Right. And that this case comes in a posture, and you could really hear it at that very, very surprising Monday hearing, where she is absolutely clear in her head. And the government, by the way, the Justice Department is like, we don't know who's in charge of DOJ. We can't tell you how many people were fired. Like, it's they played their part perfectly in terms of we choose not to even investigate how many people have lost their jobs. Like, it's really important, the willful ignorance and stupidity of the Justice Department in that hearing, and the idea that, like, if we can't answer your question, maybe you'll go away, really animated there, right? But I think that, like, it's clear that she is struggling with, I can't figure out if, you know, the harms that are alleged are really going to happen, or they're too speculative, right? She's trying to do sort of like judging 101, right? Is there like some, you know, tangible harm, and can I put something into place and that's imminently going to happen, and can I put, that's what she's doing, okay? Right. But the problem is, and this goes to your larger question, and this is where we're all sitting right now, I think, is that, like, the judicial system does not exist to halt a coup. Like, it didn't on January 6th of 2021. And it's clear that what we are seeing, and we're seeing it like in dribs and drabs from the judges who are putting TROs into place, who are doing what they need to do, this doesn't map onto something we've seen before. Right? That if you simply create a non-official government agency and can't say who the head of it is, who is the executive there, and they can't answer that, it's very hard for a judge to say, oh, look, here's all this case law on this. I mean, in some sense, this is why we're like looking back to like Humphrey's executor, you know, like to arcane cases in the Hampton Dellinger case. Right. And so I think it's really important to understand that the law is sort of by definition backward looking. It is by definition about amassing fact. Very hard to amass facts, like to have any kind of record when they're either lying to you on the record or they just don't know.
I want to distinguish, because in this, we talked on Monday about the Hampton Dellinger case and versus this DOJ case. And for me, I would be perfectly fine with Dellinger losing his job and just basically saying the same thing they did with CFPB, because if we ever get back in power, I would also like a good president to be able to get rid of those agency heads, right? Like, that is not as much of an issue for me. It feels to me like this case is the Gordian knot that you're talking about. And I think yesterday I read out loud from the complaint, because there's this beautiful thing saying, you know, King George, one of the bad things he did that made it into the Declaration of Independence was creating of offices, right? And so what you're talking about is the most disturbing thing, because we know that a president can't create an agency or an office. That's for sure. But what he's doing, you're saying, factually speaking, just in a so-called advisory group inside of inside of the executive office of the president, with someone else like being an advisor. And ultimately, where it comes down to, and I wish someone would do this, I'm imagining not a smoke-filled room, but someone going on a very long walk in a field where there is no audio or totally off the grid, with John Roberts, and saying, what is the case that you think would work before your court? Because just yesterday, the executive order where Donald Trump says, you know, what I say is the law when it comes to the executive branch. And, you know, that power grab is a little, you know, Marbury versus Madison SCOTUS kind of situation. But if John Roberts actually wants a court or a country, it seems to me, and I know these things don't happen except in the movies, but in my movie, you know, in my Frank Capra film, you know, someone goes for a walk with him and says to him, what is the harm that you would need to see to affirm something Chutkan put in place? What is the case? Who would have standing? And fucking do that. And I know that can't happen in our society, but why the hell not? Because, Dahlia, you're smarter than me. You clerked for a federal judge. Yes. But I'm thinking outside of, like, I can't think inside of the law because the law isn't going to work. And so I want to think inside of power and the deciders right here. And I know they don't have an army. I know you're going to talk to me about Worcester versus Georgia. But I just want to know, what is the case that Roberts would affirm? And does it even matter because the Army belongs to Donald Trump? So help.
Look, the question you're asking is sort of orthogonal to this, the power question of like what happened. I mean, it's Sam Bagenstos was on my show.
I love Sam.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah.
And he was on my show this past weekend. And one of the things he said that I thought was really helpful was like, we have to stop thinking about the question of, is this a constitutional crisis? Because it's way too narrow an aperture, right? It's just, the first week we were like, is this a coup? I don't know. Is it a coup? Should we call it a coup? Maybe we'll call it a self coup. And we spent the week fighting about the nomenclature. And then last week we spent the pointy heads, in our ambit, the lawyer pointy heads. Is this a constitutional crisis? I don't know. What is the definition? And it's too narrow, right? Because what we are seeing is essentially like a hostile takeover of democracy, right? Which is more or less what an auto coup is.
Autogolpe, the Spanish term.
Exactly. But I think like fighting about, if you look at the classic definition of what a constitutional crisis is, and it's like two branches of government at loggerheads, right? One says you have to do this and the other says make me. And, that's right? That's what you learn. It's not a useful frame for this because already they have violated court orders, right? If that's the definition, we're there. Right. So I think that, and then we start bargaining against interest, right? I know this seems like I'm not answering, but I am answering.
No, I'm loving this. Keep going.
Then you start bargaining against interest. Well, where you're like, well, okay, they've violated court orders, but only district court orders. Like, let's wait until they violate, an appellate court order, and then you can call it and I think Sam's point is like, none of that is helpful to us, like, because it puts us yet again in this posture of waiting for a thing that has no analog in American history, waiting for this thing to happen so that we can take action. And so I think that the useful way to think about this is two things, and both of them maybe go to what you said about what is the point of all this, because we've run out of road on the law, right? Like, you're not going to send a federal marshal in to enforce whatever the court order is that comes down. And we're already seeing from them, I think the point of that executive order last night is like, we don't have to obey it. And by the way, the federal marshal's answer to, say it with me, Pam Bondi, right? She's their boss. So be very mindful of who is going to stop them. And at the same time, I think that what you're asking is really hard, because if you go back and you parse the immunity decision that came down last July, when the court way over its skis in terms of what it had to decide that case, and the boundaries, the sort of maximalist boundaries of what they said was the immunity that they were conferring on the president. If you go back and you look at that, one plausible reading of that isn't just, oh, they wanted to keep their guy out of jail so that they could continue to hand over wins to, big corporations and the Koch family. No, what they were doing in the most generous construction, I'm not saying I'm avowing this, is a maximalist theory of executive power. And if you think about that, right?
An energetic executive, right?
Exactly. That cannot be chilled, from doing what it needs to do, and that can't live in fear of going to jail after its term, right? That's the theory. That's not all that surprising, right? That's the bathwater that baby John Roberts was bathed in, right? Like when they poured like Johnson & Johnson shampoo on little Sammy Alito's head, that was made of this theory, right? Of the unitary executive that these guys have been pushing, right? For many decades. Don't be surprised when they make claims like that, because that was the claim. Right. So the reason that Hampton Dellinger and like these cases are going to be kind of hard cases is they live squarely in a theory of the unitary executive, which is entirely invented, which is entirely ahistoric, which is like a creature of the Federalist Society of the last half century, and is not, in fact, how this has worked. This sits squarely in the middle of that, right? Which, as does the executive order from last night. And so what's hard for John Roberts is, how do you like fall out of love with the idea of an executive branch that exerts complete control because that's the idea that you were essentially signing into law in the immunity decision. And that's why these are hard cases. And that's why, and this is where I wanted to wind my answer to you. I think it's really important, Nancy Gertner, Judge Nancy Gertner, again on my show, I love her, said that we have to think in terms of not just the power of law, but the expressive power of law. And I think that what you're asking me is not just a question about how do we make them stop, because I have, like you, like grievous doubts that a court order is going to make it stop. But the single best thing that could have happened in terms of the expressive power of law, Jen, is a man standing up in front of a judge and saying, I have no idea who's in charge of Doge. I'm telling you, it's not Elon Musk, but I don't know who it is. I have no idea how many federal jobs evaporated. And that's good, because that's what gets Stephen Miller on national television screaming his face off.
And this is where my own, and I know this won't happen, Dahlia, but to like thread this is, in my dream, let's just imagine if there were, we'll never have enough courageous Republicans at the moment, but if they wanted him to go away, which they don't, they could do that with an impeachment and conviction. The only way to get rid of this guy at this point is to take over the Congress and get a supermajority in the Senate. And the only way that happens is if they blow the whole thing up. And so, part of me watches this, and it's not a FAFO thing, and I am not celebrating, but I'm reminded of FDR in the long interregnum until March when he took office, deciding he wasn't going to, go do a press conference with Hoover. He was going to watch the banks grind into a halt. And then he was going to have his bank holiday, shut the whole thing down. And then he had the power to do what he did. That power came from suffering. And I don't see, I wish it weren't the case. And so I just wish Donald Trump F's something up so badly that we can actually get Congress to act. That, I know that seems so almost impossible now, but it feels like that would work.
Two things.
Okay.
If you were hoping that Republicans were going to find their spines, right? Their own constituents are losing jobs, right? The national parks are closing, the Kennedy Library closed. J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump have just sold out Ukraine, right? This was, I thought, the cardinal article of faith, right, for the Republican Party. And I just want to connect it to where we started because I think it's important.
And I promise to let you go because I know you've got other shows. So
No.
Okay.
I think this is it Chuck Grassley right now? Which senator is trying to special plead his way out of the Canadian tariffs because it's going to damage I think it's Grassley. And it's so fascinating to me that we're back to the place where, right, Republicans will throw in behind him and throw in and then ask for special favors, right? And that's what we're going to see. And that's why, Katie Britt immediately, right? She's like, oh, but not my hospital, not my hospital. Like, I need to be exempted. And so just watch the pattern.
This is back to your article.
Yes. Watch.
Right? Oh my God, Dahlia.
Watch the Medici pattern repeating itself. There is, as long as you can get a special favor from the president, you can afford to throw in with him on all his stuff, knowing that you'll be exempted. So that's like one of the reasons I think we're never going to get Republicans to defect. And that's terrifying, but there it is. It's almost self-fulfilling. Once you've created a sort of, Medici / crime boss model, then all you need to do, right? And that's why, by the way, in that unbelievably depressing reporting in the New York Times about Thom Tillis, if you threaten to primary the guy, doesn't matter that he's actually trying to get Pete Hegseth not to be confirmed, right? Because now you're in his pocket. And so that's that. I think the other thing that has to happen, and again, this material better than I do in terms of like what it takes, to grind Congress to a halt. I think what it's going to take is this question of how much do people have to suffer And, we're seeing it with federal employees, right? We're seeing it with hospitals. We're going to see, like, I think a horror show in terms of what, the FDA
and the measles
rules.
epidemic and all of it. Yeah.
So I think that it's going to require this massive, turning of a huge ship to get people to the place where, and this is, the other thing I sort of tried to say in my article, that we are in such a NIMBY moment, not in my backyard, that it's possible for people to say, and that's what, those themes we're seeing all over the internet, like, oh, I'm all for MAGA, I'm for Doge, I'm for cost cutting, but can you take care of my father-in-law? He's at the VA hospital and the nurses are all being fired. And I think that we are like very, very post-COVID, like, I don't quite understand the theory that it's okay if everybody else suffers as long as I don't suffer. But like, to penetrate that, right? Which is, I think, what has to happen to penetrate.
This is a big, it's hard to penetrate. Sorry to cut you off, because this is exactly why we couldn't get bottom up mortgage cram down, reducing principal, because it was always about, that's why my book was called Other People's Houses, right? We'd bail out the bankers, we would do all these different things. But my neighbor, it's just like the guy who was on the commodities exchange and started the Tea Party. I don't want to bail out my neighbor who has an extra bathroom when I had to save my money. In this kind of, turning us against each other while they rob us blind and crush the democracy. I wish people were better than that, but maybe they will wake up. I think hopefully we all organize together, maybe.
I think so. And I think, you're back to, like, what is it in psychology? They call it the fundamental attribution error, right? Where, like, when somebody does something good, you're like, eh. And when someone does something bad, you're like, oh, they're the sum of that bad thing. It's a way of thinking about how you want to seat a jury, believe it or not, in a trial. And I think that we have absolutely, I mean, it's why in, one study after another, Americans say, like, I'm in the top, like, 1% of, like, like they have stories they tell about, I picked myself up by my bootstraps, right? Everybody else is on the dole, get your government hands off my Medicare. Like, every one of those is a version of, I'm entitled to all the spoils, and everybody else is a lazy grifter, right? That's the and so I think the work here is, and this is where it's useful to go back to, the famous Obama speech, Elizabeth Warren's work, like the people who think, in the world of how we think about entitlements and benefits, you didn't build that road. Like, you didn't make that truck,
right.
And I think that we, it's a little bit, and now I'm way out of my.
This is everyone loves this, because we like to deal with the psychological and the emotional and the propaganda. So you keep going, and then we'll close it, and I'll let you be free, and we'll have to get a drink in the real world at some point.
Please, but maybe even now, if you show me Stephen Miller again, I don't know that I could do it without, like, a little bourbon. But I think, sorry for the cough. What I want to say is, I think we have to, and it's not, you said, like, we should be better than that. We are intuitively better than that, right? Like, we are intuitively aware that we did not build that road. And we are intuitively aware that it is better for children to be educated than not, and better for children to be vaccinated than not. We know this stuff.
Yes.
It's one of the reasons every one of these moves is so unpopular, right? We are intuitively aware that we would like public spaces and landmarks to be open this summer and not closed.
Right.
But I think what we really have to be careful of, and I'm sorry to land up at the Medicis again, if we are given an exit ramp that says, here's a world in which everybody else suffers, but your plane doesn't fall out of the sky, we might be sort of interested in taking it. And so what we really need to do, I think, is be mindful of the fact that even though you think you're the smartest, best, luckiest person in the world, you did not earn stuff that other people, should not get. And that's a really hard mindset to get out of. As I say, I think it's slightly informed by ideas about American exceptionalism and ideas, and COVID didn't help, right? COVID made us quite grabby hands.
Okay, I'm going on the final note, though. Both of us are married to artists, and I want to say this. The Medici regime did give us Michelangelo. Michelangelo.
Yes.
And this is the thing that fucking kills me. Donald Trump doesn't have any fucking aesthetic sensibility. I want Michelangelo. I don't want Lee Greenwood's America song. And so if we are going to go back to this feudal / mercantilism, could we at least have good music and art? But the answer to that is fucking no. And that is the thing that bargain. No, am I wrong?
No, you're totally right. But maybe, I think it takes us back. I can't believe I'm taking us back to Stephen Miller, like losing his shit on national television. But it takes us back to kind of, again, the performative power of the law.
Right.
Because I think what Stephen Miller is mad about is that you don't love Lee Greenwood. And why won't you love Lee Greenwood? And what's wrong with you? And I'm telling you right here, right now, that Kid Rock is better. And like the fact that you don't feel my feelings is what's wrong with you. And I think our immense power in this moment, I'm only being half fatuous. I think our immense power in this moment is that our story is a better story, right? Because it's a story about like freedom and opportunity and equality and dignity and like, Elon Musk chuckling about people getting shipped off to like that's psycho stuff. And so I think where we have immense power is the narrative power of saying, you can like your crappy music and I'll like my crappy music. But the idea that for the first time in American history, they're going to ban books and they're going to ban, art, and that they have to take the freaking rainbow flags and the origami birds off the walls so that Pete Hegseth's wife doesn't have to see it. Like, this is our immense power because people kind of like origami birds and they should be allowed to have them. So I think where our real power is using the language of art, of culture, of feelings, of music, of shared values to push back on this like insane hegemonic power grab, which not only says, to finish where we started, I'm going to break your window and then sell you the plate glass replacement. That's what we're in. Right. But I think it's also to say, wow, Stephen Miller is really angry that his story is stupid. And the fact that we're laughing because his story is stupid is our big power right now.
I love you. This is great. Thank you for joining us. Can we play out the show with Crazy Town? Because that's what we always do. And then you just wave while I, wave. Okay, here we go.